The temple வந்திருக்கும்.
Hundreds of tons of mud and soil until we could reach the original ground level of the Sphinx's Avenue itself. Then we collected any destroyed statue, any wrecked statue to monument restoration and maintenance workshops to restore it, and then we bring it back. Some statues are done, but some statues are not in place because they are still in restoration. 4 years ago, we had a great celebration of reopening the Sphinx's Avenue after doing all restorations needed, and it was a very big celebration here. Since this celebration, UNESCO announced Luxor City as an open-air museum because the East Bank is occupied by a massive historical site, including the Sphinx's Avenue between the two temples. So 4 or 5 years ago, Luxor was announced as an open-air museum. At the end of our free walk inside the temple, don't forget...
It is 2.8 kilometers, Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple link. It was only recently found for 30-40 years back. And the connection between the both the temples. So on the opposite side, we are looking at Luxor Temple. Now we are going to go inside the Luxor Temple. So in the temple 1870 in the picture. So in the இடத்துல வந்து நிறைய வீடு இருக்கு. அப்புறம் தான் வீடுங்களை டெமாலிஷ் பண்ணியிருக்காங்க. ஸோ இங்கெல்லாம் வீடுங்க இருக்கு. They demolished it before bringing this temple, restoring it back.
This is what I'm saying, and what I mean when I'm saying
தெரியலப்பா. ஸோ இன்னும் பெட்டர் வியூ அந்த ஒரு எஃபிஜிஸும் பாருங்க கிளியராக இருக்க வியூ.
Unique temple, and in fact there are many reasons to consider it unique. Let's mention some of these reasons. First of all, it's not a temple to be built and dedicated to a god like any other temple in Egypt, but it's one of two temples, only two temples in Egypt built by the king to be dedicated for his beloved wife. This is one of the reasons to consider it unique. Second reason, all other temples in Egypt, at least 15 or 20 kings in a row along 100 or 200 years made the construction. This is the only temple was made by just two kings, and 85% of it was just made by one king. A king, his name is Amenhotep III. This is the only temple in Egypt that represents 5 different civilizations. Ancient Egyptian, Greeks are represented here, Romans represented here, Christian Arabs represented here, Muslim Arabs represented here. In addition to that, 5 different religions. Ancient Egyptian religion is represented here, Islam is represented here, and I'm telling you later on why. Christianity is represented here, ancient Greco-Roman mythology is represented here, and a cult appeared in Europe for just 100 years and then disappeared from all over the world. The only temple still having a chapel for this cult is the Temple of Luxor, a cult called the Roman Emperor cult. When the Romans started to worship the Roman Emperor himself, they made for this cult several temples and chapels in East and South Europe, and in the Middle East, by the collapse of the Roman Empire, all of these temples and chapels were destructed by intention, except one chapel for our good luck remained within the walls of Luxor Temple. Islam is represented here by the very first mosque to be built in Luxor city. Last city in Egypt to get Islam was Luxor. Till the 10th century AD, people living around Luxor Temple and people living around Karnak Temple were still believing in Amun Ra. After having Christianity for 1,000 years and after having Islam for 400 years, some Egyptians living there and here were still believing in the cult of Amun Ra. A Moroccan sheikh, his name is Abu al-Hajjaj, heard that there are some Egyptians in Egypt believing in the cult of Amun-Ra. He didn't believe it. This leading Muslim country and the earliest Christian country still having people believing in pagan gods. So he came all the way from Morocco to here. He met the people of Luxor, and he could introduce Islam to the majority of the people of Luxor. That's why they allowed him to use this deserted site, this empty site, to build a mosque. It wasn't recognized 1000 year AD that this is an ancient temple. It was just a site, some exposed walls, some exposed rocks, but no one knows what is it. So they gave him the permission to build a mosque over there. 400 years later to the construction of the mosque, we discovered the church below. So currently behind the left-hand side wall, there is an ancient Egyptian temple, dates back to 1200 BC, and then a church was built by the 4th century AD till the beginning of the 7th century AD. Then it was neglected for 300 years, buried, and then a mosque was built above. So it's a mosque above a church, above ancient Egyptian temple for ancient Egyptian cult. And that's why I'm telling you, it's very unique temple. Within the walls of this temple, we discovered so far 18 romantic poems written from this romantic king to his beloved wife, Amenhotep III. That's why we call him the romantic king in our history. This man married several wives, like all other ancient Egyptians. One of these wives, her name was Queen T, who was not Egyptian. She was from the Hittites, currently Syrians, and southern Turkish. In the ancient times were Hittites. He loved this girl so much. She was the daughter of the Hittite king. She was a princess. And then he proposed to her, and he married her, and he got her to Egypt to live with him, and he built her a complete temple. And currently we discovered in his tomb and in his temple 18 romantic poems he wrote for this wife. And not just these romantic poems. One of the very common royal standards of art was to depict the wife a little bit smaller than the king's size. This king is the only king in our history who didn't mind to depict his wife in all statues and in all scenes same size of him. But some scenes she appeared bigger than him, giving her more respect than the respect he gives to himself. That's why as well I'm telling you it is a unique temple. Over there you'll find 6 pictures for the 6 kings who participated in the constructions. 98% was made by 2 kings, Amenhotep III and Ramesses II, and 2% was made by the other 4 kings. These 2% are columns and statues. The other 4 kings, the story to tell. As you see, we have 6 statues decorating the entrance, 4 standing and 2 sitting. 4 standing represents the king while progressing, developing the economy, and expanding the borders of Egypt to the 4 directions. But 2 sitting on a throne represents the king as the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. After the unification of the 2 kingdoms of ancient Egypt, the most honorable and the most important title for a king is to give himself the title of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. It was something very honorable and very important for every king to be proud of, that I can keep Egypt, the 2 kingdoms of Egypt, unified under my rule. So he represents himself here once as the king of Upper Egypt, once as the king of Lower Egypt. Clear so far? 2 statues are sitting on a throne, measures 18 meters tall, cut of gray granite, which is one of the most solid rocks on earth, of 1 piece of stone. Cut of 1 piece of stone.
It's a monolithic stone statue.
280 tons. In front of the 2 statues, there were 2 obelisks. 2 obelisks for King Ramesses II. These 2 obelisks, 1832, was gifted from the king of Egypt, a king called Muhammad Ali, not the American boxer. This Muhammad Ali was an Albanian man from Albania. He joined the Turkish army during the Ottoman Empire, and then the Ottoman emperor sent him to Egypt to become the representative of the Ottoman Empire in Egypt. Right? Muhammad Ali, 1832, he decided to give these 2 obelisks to the King of France. Imagine, with all equipments France is having, all abilities, the French Navy was having at this time, 1832, they could only take one obelisk, which is nowadays standing in Du Palais de la Concorde in Paris. If you've been to Paris, there is an obelisk over there. It is ours, which was standing here. And then the French king apologized for taking the other obelisk, saying that it's really hard, cost us a lot of efforts to take this obelisk to France. So we will not take the second. For our good luck, that the second one remained here. But think about this. If ancient Egyptians with just wooden and copper tools, some ropes, could cut this obelisk in Aswan, 360 kilometers to the south of here, and they could cut it of one piece of red granite, then they could transport this obelisk 360 kilometers to here, and they could erect the obelisk in place, in perfection, without any damage or any problem. How come just 200 years ago, using one of the strongest navies in the world, they couldn't take the two obelisks? They took only one. That's why, my dear friends, according to the latest research we had in Egypt, most probably we had two separate civilizations in ancient Egypt. Not all monuments we see dates back to the same period.
Taken almost 100 years to build it.
What's the difference? Started to believe that in Egypt we had a civilization with ability and knowledge that we don't know. This civilization was totally destructed because of a natural disaster. Most probably it was a flooding somewhere around 9,400 BC or 9,500 BC. This flooding remained flooding the area of the Middle East for at least 3,000 years, destructed a complete civilization, and then Egyptians who started to gather around the Nile River again after the end of the flooding and the land became dry again. They started to gather around the Nile River. They built another civilization. It's the civilization that we know. So according to the most recent research, there are two ancient civilizations in Egypt. The more ancient civilization dates back to anywhere older than 9,400 BC, and then 3,000 years of a natural disaster caused a complete change in the nature of Egypt. By the way, before 9,400, Egypt was tropical, and all of North Africa was tropical, and this was confirmed by all geologists. North Africa was tropical 9,400 BC and older. This natural disaster, the flooding, most probably was the reason to change the nature of the area from a tropical area to a desert area. And that's why the civilization made after the flooding is different, with different abilities, different knowledge, different know-how. And according to this theory, a lot of Egyptologists are dating some monuments to the older civilization. For example, this obelisk cut of one piece of red granite. These two colossal statues sitting on a throne. Because for many Egyptologists, it doesn't make sense that the same king made himself two colossal statues cut of granite of one piece, and then he made himself many other statues, life-size of sandstone, but not just life-size with sandstone, but with many mistakes. This statue has no mistake. This statue is perfectly symmetrical. These statues are perfectly symmetrical. If you photograph the statue on a Photoshop, split the body into two halves, you'll find them typically identical with a percentage of mistake 0.008. Percentage of mistake is 0.008. So it's a perfect statue for King Ramesses II. Same king made tens of other statues of easier material, sandstone, a smaller size, and if you take a photograph of the statues, you'll not find it perfectly symmetrical. If the same king can make his statues perfectly symmetrical, and he can use this material like this, why he didn't make all of his statues of the same material? And that's why, and many other evidences about this, in the upcoming days we will discuss it together, but according to the most recent research, some monuments dates back to the older civilization and some monuments dates back to the ancient Egyptian civilization that everyone knows. Clear so far? By the way, including the two great pyramids in Giza. they take them to the older civilization, including the Sphinx, the massive Sphinx in Giza. As well, they did it to the older civilization. But some other monuments, we did it to the current civilization. Let's walk now together to pass close to the statues to feel how big are these statues.
கிட்ட போறோங்க.
Because the way back, we propose to... You got it? So it's now 5...
இல்லை ஃபர்தர் வாக் பண்ண போகிறோம்.
620 தானே வர சொன்னேன்.
கிங் ராமசஸ் 2ஓட இது பாருங்க, கொஞ்சம் கிளியராக இருக்குது. உள்ள போகிறோம். குயின் இது அந்த ஆப்போசிட் சைட்லையும் பாருங்க, ரெண்டு பேருமே ஒரே ஹைட்டில் இருக்குது. போஸ்ட்ல கொஞ்சம் ஹைட்டாக இருக்காங்க. ஸோ அந்த ஃபைனல் சாங்க்ரம் வரும். ஓகேங்களா? ஸோ
Lotus stem.
ஈவினிங் லைட்டிங் எஃபெக்டில் பாருங்க, இதுதான் ஒரே டெம்பிள் இன் ஈஜிப்ட். இந்த லைட்டிங் எஃபெக்டோட ஈவினிங் நிறைய பேர் விசிட்டர்ஸ் வர்றது. உள்ளே வந்தாச்சு. ஸோ இங்கே பாருங்க, என்ட்ரன்ஸ் சாங்க்ரம் மாதிரி இருக்குது. ஸோ ரிகவர்ட் ஸ்பாட்ஸு உள்ளே போகிறோம். லைட் ஓகே. ஸோ some more of the images. Okay. So colors are also inner part, colors are visible. Madi Patanala, Abu Dhabi airport. We have hired a wheelchair assistant. Sanctuary area பற்றி ஒரு history கூகுளில் போட்டாவே இருக்கும்னு நினைக்கிறேன். ஸோ we are not going through it because of time constraint. அதே மாதிரி தான் இருக்குது என்டையர் திங். நாங்கள் ஸ்ப்ரிங்ஸோட இது போகிறோம். அடுத்தது இந்த டெம்பிள் விட்டு வெளில போய் ஜஸ்ட் வியூ ஆஃப் இட். ஸோ இந்த வீடியோவில் சொன்னது தான் இந்த ரெண்டு டெம்பிள் கனெக்ஷன் ஸ்ட்ரீட்டு. இது 2.8 கிலோமீட்டர் ஸ்ட்ராங்கு. ஸோ உங்களுக்கு இந்த மாதிரி ஸ்ப்ரிங் ஸ்டாச்சுன்னு சொல்கிறது இந்த மாதிரி நிறையா இருக்கும். ஸோ ஃபேஸ் வந்து ஹியூமன் பீயிங் ஃபேஸ் இருக்குது, பட் பாடி ஆஃப் அன் அனிமல் இருக்குது பாருங்கள். ஸோ இந்த மாதிரி லாட்ஸ் அண்ட் லாட்ஸ் ஆஃப் ஸ்டாச்சூஸ் ஆர் தேர் across both the sides, and which stretches for 2.8 kilometers. So connecting both the temples, which was recently discovered only. Paranga in the side la temple or view. So signing off from Luxor temple. அடுத்து நாங்கள் அதே கர்நாக் டெம்பிளுக்கு லைட் அண்ட் சவுண்ட் ஷோ இருக்குது, அங்கே போகிறோம். ஓகே.